conservatives are really, really good about talking about the dangers of concentrated political power. For some reason, we've become seduced by the libertarians and have forgotten the dangers of concentrated economic power. And antitrust law is really meant to help deal with that. It's a secondary goal. It's not the primary goal, but it's a secondary goal. And because it is a secondary goal, I think it counsels in favor of an application of the antitrust laws that puts more concern about false negatives than what we're doing today, right? To ensure that we're not under-deterring, because if we're under-deterring, then antitrust law fails to realize those other secondary benefits to the politics and society in our country that come from not having massively concentrated economic power.
Well, and secondarily, those social consequences in an era where the sort of physics of economics is changing because of the digital age, those social consequences can be a bit of a metal detector for where there might be concentrations of power that under previous standards or formula were not being picked up. It's not that, oh, this bad thing is happening in society, therefore we must do antitrust. It's, well, how is this corporation able to have such a distortive effect on American society? It might be the case that they have extraordinarily concentrated power, and that's something worth paying attention to on its own terms, not just because of the social consequences. Yeah. Are there examples outside of the tech sector where this is particularly salient? You were telling me before we started taping that, you are an antitrust lawyer who has been forced to become a tech lawyer in some ways because that's been the primary venue where these questions have been assessed, but maybe give a bit of an overview of other places where this might be relevant.
Yeah, I think you look at finance, you look at agriculture, you look at the airline industry. I think there's been a lot of areas where airlines, I don't think that has really societal impact, but you can see examples of people, at least.
I fly a lot. My society has changed.
Maybe, actually, I might have to take that back. I'd say who's happy with their experience in an airport today, and who thinks that the culture and mood you find in an airport today is good for American society. And because you have a bunch of people closely concentrated who are extremely frustrated with their consumer experience in that moment. Not on the scale, I think, of what Instagram is doing to kids or what Facebook is doing to public discourse. But, in the banking sector, it's not hard to see how massive concentration of not literal economic power, right, control over where wealth is distributed, has immediate effects on communities, which, when you impact the economic vibrancy of a local community, you're immediately impacting the culture. And we can see that in small towns all over the country that have been decimated. And you have more people strung out on meth sitting on the sidewalk than small businesses that are feeding families and communities. So I think you can really extrapolate almost anywhere from any part of the economy to see where those effects are. But on the flip side, look, I think there are examples throughout the economy of small and medium-sized businesses that are thriving. They're not, economically inefficient and just a bloat on consumers, but they're actually providing consumers and businesses quality products at fair prices while paying their employees a good wage and supporting their families and the communities around them. So it's not black and white. It's not all doom and gloom. But I think those bad examples do jump out, right, when we encounter them because they have such a salient impact.
What is your assessment of the state of antitrust on the right of center these days? Yeah. You worked for a senator who I think deserves enormous credit for actually keeping an open mind on things. People might accuse Senator Lee of being a libertarian. I think that's largely incorrect.
It's false. I'll go on the record. It's flat false. I've been in the room with him where he's looked someone in the eye and said, "I'm not a libertarian." Yeah. So just to dispel that myth.
Yeah. And I think he's taken a very facts-based approach to this. He's been willing to hear out evidence, but mostly that's not brought all of his former fans and now critics along with them. They've just been like, oh, Senator Lee sold out to the fascists or whatever they end up saying. Walk me through the landscape. I mean, you've been here since the heyday of the Tea Party, when the idea of government doing a thing was communism. Yeah. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, no, it's one of the most fascinating ongoing shifts and developments and debates in DC right now. I think antitrust is, and the debate around antitrust policy is a subset of a larger movement within the right over how we should view economic power and the use of government power. As I mentioned earlier, conservatives are really, really good about saying big government is bad. We don't want concentrated political power. We know the danger to liberty when political power is concentrated in a few hands. We have horizontal and vertical federalism, as Senator Lee likes to point out. We break everything up to protect people. If you're talking about politics, you'd think the conservative view is that big is bad, and no one would object to that. But suddenly we apply that to the economic space and you're a heretic, right? If you say big is bad when you're talking about corporations or economics, well, what's wrong with you? Like, you're a progressive socialist, what have you. But I think what we're seeing now is a growing realization on the right. And I would say it's not even a realization, it's almost a return to the authentically conservative understanding that concentrated economic power is just as dangerous as concentrated political power. Something Jonathan Cantor said last week, and I'll say he stole it from me. But it's true. I think that is the authentically conservative position. And what we're witnessing is essentially the divorce of conservatives from libertarians, right? We want to zoom out to the kind of political philosophy writ large. We had an alliance between conservatives and libertarians in the mid 20th century because we all said communists bad. We're going to fight the communists. We're all on the same team. We set aside some of our differences, worked together in a pretty successful movement. Communist Russia fell. You've got communist China, which is more authoritarian than any kind of economic ideal or anything like that. The communist threat is not there as much now. So we've returned our focus domestically. Everyone always knew that conservatives and libertarians had different social views, right? The libertarians are kind of these like fetishist freaks and all of that. And the conservatives have families and we're wholesome and all of that when we do it right.
Pornographers, payday lenders, drug salesmen.
But we've forgotten that conservatives have different economic views than libertarians as well. And I think that's what's returning. And in large part, it's spurred on by people looking at the economy we have and looking at the challenges posed by different large economic actors. And yeah, big tech is a big part of that, but they're not the only ones. And so I think people are starting to say, hey, yeah, I don't have to think about these things the way some libertarian economist would. I don't wake up in the morning worrying about my utils and how I'm going to maximize them and all these sorts of things. Like, I'm trying to raise my family and provide for them as best that I can.
And some pervert with his charts is not going to convince me.
Look, I've got 6 kids, so trust me, I look at my grocery bill and I care about how much the price of eggs is or bread, and it's a lot. But I'm not going to say that maximally low prices and efficiency are God, right? That those are the highest good in society. The highest good is virtue and excellence. And I think that's another authentically conservative value. And I think that's the side of the right that is witnessing a revitalization, is realizing that being conservative doesn't mean offloading your mind to some economic theorist. Your social values are tied to your economic values. There's a holistic approach to what it means to be human. We're not just numbers in a formula. And so we can't boil down everything we do into some, economic transaction or trade-off. There's a lot more at play here and a lot more to be taken into consideration when we're looking at economic policy. So I think that there's that. And antitrust is a subset of that. Antitrust is huge because it's probably the most economic, or I should say it's the area of law that's most directly aimed at the economy, right? We're dealing with economic structures and markets and how they're going to function. What's the nature of competition? How are these businesses going to interact and compete for our business? So it's a natural place to go when you're looking at the distribution of economic power and wealth and control in society. And so that's what you're seeing there, is that's starting to play out. And then I think on top of that, you have a reconsideration of the role of government. And saying, we all know that the government is there for national security, right? To protect us against foreign enemies that would invade us, keep us safe. But you also have people pushing back against these libertarians. The libertarian approach is, hey, private company, they can do what they want. If they want to rake you over the coals and squeeze every dime out of you, well, take your business elsewhere. Never mind, you don't have anywhere else to go. Tough luck, start up your own company.
Yeah. Sorry, they're not letting you start your own company.
I forgot, yeah.
Start your own country. Oh, okay, maybe I will.
So just, you need to bootstrap your way up and buy an island. And so people have realized that it's really a hollow promise. Senator Lee had a great line a year or two ago where he said, it's a shallow conception of liberty if we would congratulate somebody for throwing off the shackles of big business or of big government, only to be encumbered with those of big business, right? For the government to come out and say, hey, we've enshrined all these rights in the Constitution, we've protected the rights that God gave you, but you're on your own defending them from the corporations that are trying to take them away. Mm-hmm. What good is that, right? What good is the government if it doesn't defend me from those malicious actors, right? And so I think conservatives are coming around on the use of political power as well. It's not about punishing your enemies or an eye for an eye or being vindictive or pretextual. It's about acknowledging that the government has a legitimate role to play in protecting our economic liberties and our cultural values and like the economic thriving of communities. We don't have to just offload everything to the private sector or a free market and assume that a free market is self-perpetuating, right? If you're going to have a free market, it has to be fair. You have to have rules of the road. Somebody has to enforce those rules. We don't let, professional sports, you don't have teams playing a pickup game and they call foul on each other. We have umpires and referees for a reason. The government plays that role in the economy to make sure that we have fair competition so that it benefits consumers, right? The businesses are supposed to be working for us. They're supposed to be fighting over us, not dictating how we live our lives. And so that's where I think you've seen a realization among conservatives that, hey, the government has a role to play here. There is a role for political power to step in and say, no, that's not the way people want to live. This is not the kind of society we want to have. And so we're going to prescribe your behavior. And we're not talking about blowing up industries and micromanaging the economy. Far from it. We don't have to go full, far left regulatory state. It's just saying we have laws on the books. Why don't we step in and enforce them to protect our constituents? That's all people are asking for.